I've been following Elon Musk for the better part of 12 years, and during this time, he's been disrupting multiple industries at once with companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. Yet his latest disruption may turn out to be his largest and most impactful, but in ways no one is talking about. Starting with Tesla. His electric car company achieved a feat that very few thought possible, making an affordable and profitable electric car that would be sought after by millions. As of 2023, the Model Y is the best-selling car in the world by volume and revenue, and probably also profit, selling 1.2 million units in the full year. The next runner-up, the Toyota Corolla, is a car that sold about 20% less units and costs half as much as the Model Y. The Model Y is fully electric and sold in a fraction of the markets the Corolla sells in. Another venture of his, SpaceX, revolutionized the space industry, making reusable rockets not only real, but an absolute no-brainer. This allowed SpaceX to dramatically bring down the cost of access to space, earning it countless contracts with companies and the US government. As of 2023, SpaceX became cash flow neutral thanks to the profitability of its Starlink business as the company continues to develop its Starship rocket. This will allow SpaceX to begin its next leg of growth by bringing costs down even lower and potentially opening up access to the moon and Mars. The way Elon and his teams achieve this is by disrupting the existing markets through novel engineering, doing things that no one thought of or dared to do before in a mass manufacturing setting. However, when it comes to gathering the very large and passionate fan base that has existed around him and his companies, Elon's biggest and most likely impactful disruption was how he communicated the dire need for these technologies to ensure that a positive future is likely. It was a brilliant way to bring support around his missions that connected deeply with folks. I know this mainly because I am one of those people, and I've seen countless others that feel the same. A general way to think about this is with Tesla and SpaceX merely existing, people felt like there was finally someone commandeering an effort on something that truly mattered, instead of being another run-of-the-mill company that existed just to make a buck. Many of these folks felt compelled enough to invest in his ventures because of the game-changing nature of the companies. And it is in this step, once you fast forward 12 years, that the current arc that he's on has disrupted many that were on board with him not even 2 years ago. Let me explain further what I think is going on. Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world to sustainable energy generation and consumption by making electric vehicles and renewable energy a reality. The way to make it a reality is to bring the cost of these technologies down to a point where the everyday person can afford them. The idea here is to make it a no-brainer for a common person to choose a Tesla product, be it their electric vehicle, home battery, solar panel, etc., versus any non-renewable alternative. With this mission, Elon's messaging to the public for the better part of 2 decades is that this is a necessary step for humanity to survive long term. The thought process here is to move away from filling the atmosphere with emissions from fossil fuels, which over time can create disastrous effects on the climate. This will in turn accelerate the displacement of millions upon millions of people over time as sea levels rise, weather patterns become less predictable, and weather events become more severe. In other words, humans could have a material impact on climate by burning fossil fuels, and given the fact that there are technologies available that would offset these emissions fully, this is an experiment that is not worth running. And instead, we should go all in on these technologies, make them more affordable than the current offerings, and move away from a potentially very dumb experiment. Enter Tesla. With SpaceX, the goal is to make humanity multiplanetary. The thought process is that eventually, if humans do not leave Earth, our entire species will end up dying a horrific death, either through mutually assured destruction or by a force that we have no control over, like meteors, solar flares, and endless other infinitely terrifying outcomes. If a company can make affordable rocketry a reality, then humanity would have a way to colonize other planets and massively increase the chance that our species would survive an existential threat. And the best way to make said company profitable and sustainable is by offering services today, like reusable rockets and Starlink internet access through satellites, to bring down the cost of access to space, which will eventually fund missions to Mars and beyond. Enter SpaceX. And as you can see, the mission behind these companies are massively existential. One of them is trying to solve for humans potentially killing themselves off due to climate change. The other is trying to decrease the chance humans will die by forces outside of our control. However, during this whole time up until Elon decided to buy Twitter, now X, there's been a group of folks that have been very skeptical about these missions. As an example, there are many out there who do not believe very passionately that humans are causing climate change. These folks may think that governments are incorrectly funding these companies with green initiatives that are closer to throwing money into a trash can and burning it all down. I am not here to argue who is right or who is wrong, But it is of note that Elon's current arc is starting to bring together groups that have historically been at complete odds with each other. Enter X. With the purchase of Twitter, now X, Elon's existential mission statement is to preserve the sanctity of freedom of speech, as freedom of speech is incredibly important for a free and thriving democracy. Without freedom of speech, society will devolve into authoritarian rule, progress will crawl to a halt, and humanity will be subject to the will of the very few. As it pertains directly to X, the fear is that many media publications and social media outlets have been a little too aggressive when it comes to preventing speech, a lot of it legal, from appearing on their respective platforms. Sometimes these posts that are banned are of utmost importance and are needed to bring light to potential wrongs in society. But because of a willingness to silence speech that is legal but perhaps quote-unquote wrong, these media houses are curating what the public can see. This recipe can create a scenario where, depending on who's in control of what can or can't be shown, the broader population will eventually become less and less informed, giving an outsized advantage to those that are quote-unquote pulling the strings. Extend this long enough into the future, and you end up with a world that is orders of magnitude more authoritarian than it is today, since the few can control how the many feel. Information is power, and with that power, the few can control and craft the world that will align with what they think is right. On his path to be a counterweight to this dynamic, Elon appears to have garnered a new large following of people that deeply connect with his view in protecting the sanctity of free speech. Many feel that this is the most important thing for humanity, not climate change, not sustainability, but freedom of speech. However, in today's world, for some reason, these two groups are at complete odds with each other and have caused a very unique dynamic as it pertains to Elon himself. Traditionally speaking, folks that are ardent pro-climate and folks that are ardent pro-free speech live on two opposite sides of the political spectrum, especially in the United States. Pro-climate folks are traditionally more liberal in their worldview, while pro-free speech folks are traditionally more conservative in theirs. This is a massive generalization, of course, but becomes more true as you go towards the extremes of either side. Generally speaking, most people want clean air and want to exercise their right of free speech and want others to have the same right. As Elon was on his quest to get Tesla and SpaceX to a sustainable point, there were many, and I mean many folks, that were very much against his companies. I've heard things like, they are a giant scam, climate change is a hoax, Elon is sucking on the government teat for money. If you followed Tesla and SpaceX for a little while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, as Elon has progressed on his mission to solve for what he thinks is an existential freedom of speech issue, this has invoked a similar level of fervor, but from the same side that was with him for a better part of a decade simply by exercising his free speech. Wokeness is not a real thing. You hate immigrants. How dare you take the side of Putin? Now, I'm not saying that every single person that supports efforts to solve for climate change are 100% politically aligned with the above, but I do think there is a percentage of his traditional base that is put off quite a bit, to put it mildly, as Elon has been tackling what he thinks is an existential issue with free speech. Take his recent stance on immigration, the Ukraine, and others. By speaking up about his thoughts on the platform, Elon is exercising his freedom of speech, and I personally believe this is in hopes to encourage others to follow suit and do the same. But I'm also quite confident that he deeply does believe in what he says. Because what he says, as of late, has been traditionally aligned with more conservative ideas, some folks on the side that would have been incredibly passionate about his climate change initiatives are now immensely put off. Imagine being someone that has followed this man and his ventures very passionately for the better part of a decade, and all of a sudden the person that you feel is doing so much to help create a world that you would personally love to live in does a complete 180 and goes counter to your worldview. Then layer on top of that the recent Tesla stock performance since 2021. After its historic 20x run from 2019 through 2021, Tesla stock is down by more than 50% for the better part of 2 years. You now have a dynamic where there are folks that are A, upset about his focus on what he deems to be the most pressing danger to society, which is directly at odds with their own worldview and deemed insignificant at best, conspiratorial at worst, and B, upset about the fact that a public company CEO is being vocal about subjects that are, by default, very controversial, as he says and does what he thinks is needed to right the ship. Put yourself in the shoes of one of these folks and ask yourself if this is a pleasant position to be in. My bet is probably no. However, While this is happening, Elon is gathering a giant mass of people that would have traditionally hated his messaging as it pertains to EVs and sustainable energy that are now completely bought into his mission to ensure freedom of speech lives on for as long as our species is around. In my opinion, this is a dynamic that's been playing out on X since Elon announced that he'll be buying the platform back in 2022. However, I do not think the majority of folks fall directly in these camps. On the contrary, I think very few do. I think a majority of folks are silently watching from the sidelines with a healthy mix of, damn, I'm glad he did that, and damn, did he really need to say that? And also, okay, that meme is legit hilarious. But here's what I find most interesting. While many may think that Elon is creating division and is alienating many with his current efforts as it pertains to X, he's likely amassing a silent majority that is either aligned with his efforts or is not turned off or bothered much by what some on either side would deem to be unacceptable. X, since being purchased, appears to have broken multiple records in both usage and users. I think it is safe to say that the current efforts with the platform are working, although it may be quite uncomfortable for some to reconcile this with their own worldview. If there's one word I would use to describe Elon, it would be disruptor. However, by default, disruption is deeply uncomfortable. It prioritizes outcomes over feelings. It is unwieldy and untested. It forces change even when one doesn't want to. And lastly, it doesn't care about your feelings. Read Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk to get a better view into this. It's clear that the man has a mission, he thinks it needs to get done as soon as possible, and he doesn't care about anyone's feelings. He just cares about the outcome that he thinks is best for humanity. On that path, he has disrupted himself as it pertains to his long-standing brand, making many quite upset while gaining many new followers that are passionate about his new efforts. And now, we all get to decide if we're willing to speak up for, against, or likely the smartest and least stressful move, stand back and watch everything unfold as we continue to live in one of, or most likely, the most interesting time in history. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you give me a like and subscribe to this channel for more content from me related to Elon, Tesla, SpaceX, technology, artificial intelligence, and other topics as well. Thank you so much for watching.